Parents left me stranded as a joke. Decades later, they discovered what I built. They left me for a joke until I came back. So I made sure they learned a lesson. The bulldozer's engine roared to life at exactly 7 a.m., drowning out my mother's wailing. I stood there sipping my coffee, watching 20 years of their lives crumble into dust. "You can't do this," she screamed, mascara streaming down her weathered cheeks. "That's our home." I smiled and took another sip. Like that gas station was my home when I was 16? The irony was beautiful. They'd abandoned their child without a second thought, and now I was returning the favor with interest. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from relatives who'd finally heard the truth, but I ignored them all. This moment belonged to me. 20 years ago, my parents Gerald and Denise left me stranded at a gas station as a life lesson. They drove away laughing, expecting their terrified 16-year-old to crawl back home begging for forgiveness. Instead, I disappeared. I built a life, started a construction empire, and waited. Now, as their house collapsed room by room, I realized that revenge truly was a dish best served cold. Gerald and Denise weren't just strict, they were tough love fanatics. Every mistake became a character-building exercise wrapped in cruelty. Forgot to mow the lawn? They'd wake me at 3 a.m. to do it in darkness. Miss the bus? I'd walk to school in freezing rain while Mom drove past, refusing to stop. Got a C+ in chemistry? They locked me outside in February. "Maybe cold will help you focus," Dad said through the window. That July morning started like any other summer day. We were driving back from visiting my sister Sabrina at college, about 4 hours from home. I was in the back seat, half asleep, listening to my iPod when Dad pulled into this middle of nowhere gas station off I-95. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s, rusted pumps, flickering neon signs, and heat waves shimmering off cracked asphalt. "Scott, go get me a coffee," Dad barked without looking back. I dragged myself out, grabbed his crumpled cash, and trudged inside. The air conditioning barely worked, and the cashier looked half dead from the oppressive heat. The coffee machine was broken, naturally, so I had to wait while he made a fresh pot. The process felt endless, each minute stretching like an hour in that suffocating store. When I finally emerged with a steaming cup, our car was gone. At first, my tired brain couldn't process it. I looked around confused, thinking maybe they'd moved to a different pump. Then I spotted our beat-up Camry pulling onto the highway, Dad's hand casually hanging out the window like this was just another Sunday drive. I stood there in shock, coffee burning my hand, watching their taillights disappear into the distance. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home. Consider this a lesson in problem solving." That damn smiley face made my blood boil. I tried calling repeatedly, straight to voicemail every time. After 20 minutes, Mom texted again. "Don't bother calling. Your father says you need to figure this out yourself." This wasn't even their worst. 2 years earlier, they'd locked me out in February over a C+ in chemistry. I broke into our garage to sleep, then they made me pay for the broken window with my McDonald's money. Standing in that suffocating heat, something inside me snapped. I looked at the coffee in my hand and realized I was done. Completely done. This wasn't tough love, this was abuse disguised as parenting. I had $140 from my summer job, my wallet, and my iPod. That was enough to disappear. I went back inside the suffocating gas station and asked the cashier where the nearest bus station was. "About 2 miles that way," he said, pointing down a dusty road that seemed to stretch forever. "You okay, kid?" "Yeah, just need to make a call." I called my Aunt Lola, Mom's sister, who they'd cut contact with years ago because she enabled bad behavior by buying me a phone when they took mine away as punishment. She picked up on the second ring. "Scott. Honey, is everything okay? They left me at a gas station." "As a joke." "They left you where?" The fury in her voice was immediate and fierce. "Those absolute monsters." "Where are you?" What happened next still amazes me. Aunt Lola, living 4 states away, somehow arranged for a local taxi service to pick me up and take me to the bus station. She bought my ticket online while I waited in that sweltering store, watching cars pass by on the highway. "Get yourself here," she said firmly. "We'll figure out the rest." My phone kept buzzing with increasingly angry texts from Mom. "Don't you dare call Lola. You better be walking home right now. Your father is very disappointed." The messages got nastier with each one, but I didn't care anymore. I blocked their number, turned off my phone, and climbed onto that Greyhound bus. For 6 hours, I watched countryside roll by through the tinted windows, each mile taking me further from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The look on their faces when they came home to an empty house must have been something. I heard later from Sabrina that they drove back to the gas station that night, expecting to find me waiting like a scared puppy. They filed a missing persons report, but it got dismissed quickly when Aunt Lola sent over the emancipation paperwork she'd already started filing. That was 20 years ago. I finished school living with Aunt Lola, got my GED, then some certifications. I built a life from nothing, learned to fix things, started my own construction business, met someone, had kids of my own. I never played any teaching moments games with them. Real parents don't abandon their children for laughs. I thought that chapter of my life was permanently closed. Then yesterday, my office phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 2 decades. I didn't pick up, but somehow they'd found me. Now I had 39 missed calls and counting, and I knew exactly what they wanted. Not their son, their son's money. I never check my phone during meetings. It's a rule I've stuck to ever since I started my construction business. But when I walked out of the boardroom yesterday and saw 39 missed calls, my stomach dropped like a stone. The red notification badges seemed to mock me. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, but 3 were from my sister Sabrina, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 decades. Her name on my screen felt like seeing a ghost. The first voicemail was her crying, "Scott, please pick up. Mom and Dad found you. They're spiraling. Just call me back, okay?" Not them, me. My coffee went cold as I listened to the others, each message more desperate than the last. Most were from my parents, alternating between guilt, tripping, and demanding. "Your mother is sick." Dad's voice slurred through the speaker. "How dare you abandon your family?" Rich, coming from them. "We made one mistake." One. That's absolutely hilarious. The last voicemail was Dad, clearly drunk and belligerent. "You think you're better than us with your fancy business? We made you who you are, you ungrateful little shit. You owe us everything." I sat in my truck for a long time, watching my phone light up with more calls like a Christmas tree from hell. The parking garage echoed with the sound of my engine cooling. Finally, I texted Sabrina. "Meeting tomorrow. Denny's on 5th, 7 a.m. Come alone or don't come." She showed up looking exactly like I remembered, just older and more worn down. Same nervous habit of shredding napkins between her fingers, same worried expression she'd worn as a kid. "They're losing the house," she blurted before even sitting down, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Dad's been gambling again. Mom's maxed out their credit cards buying crap from QVC. They found your company website, and they want money." I finished pouring cream into my coffee, watching the white swirl through the dark liquid. My hands didn't shake. "Tell me everything." The story that emerged was pathetically predictable. Turns out they'd been stalking my company's social media for months, screenshotting photos of job sites and my office. Dad had convinced himself I owed them for my success, that somehow their abuse had made me stronger. They needed $50,000 to avoid foreclosure, and twisted logic made this my responsibility. Sabrina kept apologizing, her voice breaking as she explained how she tried to stop them from contacting me. "Why should I help them?" I asked calmly. "After everything they put me through?" She started crying again, telling me about Dad's drinking getting progressively worse, Mom's shopping addiction that had spiraled out of control, how they blame everyone but themselves for their failures. The waitress refilled our coffee, pretending not to notice the emotional breakdown at table 6. "They're still our parents," Sabrina whispered, dabbing her eyes with yet another shredded napkin. "No," I said firmly, meeting her gaze. "They stopped being my parents at that gas station." "The difference between you and me, Sabrina? You're still hoping they'll change." I accepted the truth years ago. My phone buzzed, Mom calling again. I declined it without looking and pulled out my wallet. "I'm paying for breakfast. Block my number after this. Whatever they do next, don't call me. Scott, please. I mean it. You're my sister, and I love you, but I'm not your solution. Let them fall." I was halfway to my truck when Sabrina ran after me, her heels clicking on the asphalt. "They're coming to your office," she shouted desperately. "Tomorrow morning." Mom found the address online. I tried to stop them, I swear. I just nodded, keys already in my hand. Good. Let them come. I got back to my office to find 27 new messages blinking on my desk phone. Apparently, they'd been telling the whole family I'm a heartless son who abandoned them and now refuses to help in their time of need. Classic narcissist playbook. Paint yourself as the victim while conveniently forgetting decades of abuse. But here's what they didn't know. I'd spent the last 24 hours making calls of my own. Turns out their mortgage is owned by a bank I've worked with on multiple projects. 3 months behind on payments, foreclosure already started. The bank was more than happy to discuss selling the debt to a reliable construction company with an excellent credit rating. Tomorrow morning, they'll walk into my office thinking they have leverage, thinking they can shame me, manipulate me, force me to be their retirement plan. They have no idea what's coming. I've scheduled a meeting with my lawyer first thing in the morning. By the time Gerald and Denise arrive, everything will be in place. They want to see what I've made of myself. Fine. Let them see exactly who their son became and what happens when you push someone too far. I'm not that scared 16-year-old standing in a gas station anymore. I'm not running, and I'm done playing nice. They made their choice 20 years ago when they drove away laughing. Now it's my turn to laugh. The paperwork sits in my desk drawer, all signed and notarized. Tomorrow's going to be a hell of a show, and for the first time in 2 decades, I'm looking forward to seeing my parents again. I was in my office going through invoices when Jenny, our receptionist, called up nervously. "Scott, there's a couple here insisting on seeing you. They say they're your parents." They seem really agitated. My stomach dropped, but I'd been expecting this since Sabrina's warning. Send them up. Might as well face this head on. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched Gerald and Denise walk in. They looked older, worn down by decades of bad decisions and failed schemes. Dad's trademark mustache was gray now, and Mom's dyed blonde hair couldn't hide the deep wrinkles around her eyes. They were wearing their Sunday best, the same cheap dress Mom wore to church and Dad's ancient brown suit that never fit right. The moment they stepped into my office, Mom burst into theatrical tears. "My baby boy, look at you, all grown up. Look at this beautiful office." She tried to hug me with outstretched arms. I stepped back smoothly. "Let's keep this professional," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. "What do you want?" Dad puffed up, like he always did when preparing to lecture. "Now, son, is that any way to talk to your mother after all these years?" "We're family." "Cut the bullshit," I interrupted, my voice flat. "You didn't spend 20 years looking for me because you missed me. You found me now because you need something." "What is it?" Mom's crying got louder, more dramatic. "How can you be so cruel to us? We made one little mistake. One tiny error in judgment." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "You left your 16-year-old kid at a gas station 200 miles from home as a joke, then drove off laughing about how long it would take me to crawl back. That wasn't a mistake. That was the final straw after years of psychological abuse. We came back for you," Dad shouted, his face reddening as he stood up. "We drove back after an hour, but you were gone. You have any idea what that put us through?" "Yeah, I was gone. And I stayed gone. Best decision I ever made." I leaned back calmly. "What it put you through?" "That's rich." I pulled out my phone and pressed record, making sure they could see the red light. "Now state your business or leave. I have a company to run." That's when the pathetic truth came tumbling out. Between Mom's theatrical sobs and Dad's increasingly desperate outbursts, they explained their situation. They'd taken out a second mortgage on the house for Dad's latest foolproof investment scheme, some cryptocurrency nonsense. Now they were 6 months behind on payments, and the bank was foreclosing. They needed $175,000 to save their house. "You've done so well for yourself," Mom whimpered, gesturing around my office with its city view and expensive furniture. "Look at this place. You're obviously successful. Surely you can help your own parents in their time of need?" I let them finish their rehearsed sob story, watching their performance with detached interest. Then I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder stuffed with legal documents. "Funny you should mention the house," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "See, when I heard you were looking for me, I did some digging. Found out about the foreclosure proceedings. So I had my company buy your mortgage debt from the bank at a substantial discount." The silence that followed was absolutely beautiful. Their faces went through a progression: confusion, then dawning comprehension, then shock, and finally pure fear. "What? What does that mean?" Dad's voice had lost all its bluster. "It means you have exactly 30 days to vacate the property. My company acquired it legally at auction last week. We're demolishing it next month for a new affordable housing development." Mom started wailing like a banshee, her makeup running down her cheeks. Dad's face turned purple with rage. "You can't do this to us. That's our home. We raised you in that house, like that gas station was my home when I was 16? I smiled coldly. "At least I'm giving you 30 days. You gave me about 30 seconds before driving away laughing." Dad lunged across the desk, reaching for my throat, but I stood my ground without flinching. Security rushed and I'd had them on standby since yesterday. As they dragged my parents out, Mom screamed that I was evil, that I'd rot in hell. Dad threatened lawsuits he couldn't afford. I just watched through the glass partition as they were escorted out, still recording everything on my phone. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. They just called me crying and screaming. "What did you do to them?" I typed back calmly. "Exactly what they taught me to do. Look out for myself. The demolition starts next month." 20 years of careful planning, and it's finally time to tear down the house that was never really a home. What happened in the last few days proved that karma is real, and she's got a wicked sense of humor. After I bought their house at auction through my company, Gerald and Denise completely lost what little sanity they had left. They started calling every single relative in our extended family, spinning elaborate tales about their ungrateful son throwing his own parents onto the streets without a penny to their names. But here's what they didn't expect. I had proof of everything. Remember those old Nokia phones that could record calls? I kept one from back then, and I'd recorded their prank in its entirety, them laughing hysterically as they drove away from that gas station, saying, "Let's see how long it takes the little shit to get home." I kept it all these years, along with a whole folder of birthday cards with lovely parental messages like, "Maybe if you weren't such a disappointment, we'd actually want to celebrate your existence." 20 years of documented emotional abuse, all neatly organized in chronological order like evidence for a court case. Yesterday morning, I mass emailed everything to the entire extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, even family friends. Every single person got to hear that damning recording, see those cruel birthday cards, read the actual text messages from that day at the gas station. The responses started flooding in within hours. By noon, my sister Sabrina called me crying harder than I'd ever heard her cry. "Scott, I had no idea," she sobbed into the phone. "All these years, they told everyone you ran away because you were on drugs. They said you were violent, but they were actually scared of you. They made you sound like some kind of delinquent who chose the streets over family. Classic narcissist revision of history. Rewrite the past to make yourself the victim. But the truth has a way of surfacing eventually, like oil on water." The real satisfaction came this morning when I put their theory about family loyalty to the ultimate test. I'd called them yesterday, my voice perfectly calm, and told them to come watch the demolition if they wanted one last look at their precious house. "Consider it a final goodbye," I said. They showed up with my Aunt Lola, Mom's sister, who I hadn't seen since the funeral last year, thinking she'd talk some sense into me, convince me to call off the demolition and forgive them. Instead, they got front row seats to watching their life's work get methodically torn down piece by piece. Mom was screaming about her garden, about the rose bushes she'd tended for decades like they were her actual children. Dad was threatening to sue with money he didn't have. "With what lawyer, Gerald?" I called out cheerfully over the bulldozer's roar. "You're about to be homeless. Maybe you should focus on that." The look on their faces when the bulldozer went through Mom's prize-winning rose garden was absolutely priceless. Those roses had won county fair competitions for 15 years running. 20 years of their abuse, reduced to mulch in 2 hours. But I wasn't done with my surprise. See, that land is actually in a decent location for development. Instead of some fancy subdivision for wealthy families, I'm building affordable housing, 20 units with reasonable rent, priority given to single parents and their kids. I already have the plans approved and permits filed. The best part? I'm naming the entire complex Annabelle Haven, after my aunt who took me in when I was 16. She passed away last year from cancer, but she'd love knowing her name is on something dedicated to helping people escape bad family situations. Mom and Dad tried desperately to rally the neighbors against me, showing them old childhood photos of our supposedly happy family and telling sob stories about their evil son. Too bad those neighbors remembered the reality of our household. Mrs. Henderson, who lived next door for 30 years, even came up and hugged me tightly. "I always regretted not calling Child Protective Services," she whispered in my ear. "We could hear you crying at night through the walls. I'm proud of what you've become." This morning was the final showdown, and it played out exactly like a scene from a movie. They came to my office again, this time with completely different energy, all humble and sorry and broken. Dad actually cried real tears for the first time I could remember, said they were about to be homeless and had nowhere else to turn. Mom promised she'd forgive me for everything if I just helped them out of this mess. I let them talk for a full 10 minutes, listening to their desperate pleas and promises to change. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a crisp rental application for one of the new affordable housing units. "You're welcome to apply just like anyone else," I said with a smile. "But you'll need references, proof of income, and a clean credit check. The waiting list is already pretty long, but I'm sure you understand." Their faces went through every emotion possible in rapid succession: confusion, hope, realization, then pure rage. "But we're your parents," Mom screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that probably shattered windows 3 blocks away. Dad started his usual manipulative speech. "After everything we've done for you, after we raised you and sacrificed." I just smiled wider and said, "Yes, Gerald. After everything you've done, this is exactly what you deserve." They're still blowing up my phone with increasingly unhinged voicemails. Sabrina texted me that they're staying at some fleabag motel on the highway, still claiming they'll sue me into oblivion. Good luck with that. Everything I did was completely legal, and I have the best lawyers money can buy. You know what's funny? For years, I dreamed of elaborate revenge scenarios, imagined all sorts of ways to make them pay. But in the end, just letting them face the natural consequences of their own actions feels better than anything I could have planned. They threw away their son over a cruel prank. And now they get to watch as everything they built gets torn down to help the exact kind of people they would have looked down on. Some bridges deserve to stay burned, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.